Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. And this week, we are going to hopefully actually have a lot of laughs because of the content of our discussion, but I have Howard Miller on, and he is a #1 best-selling author of Burdens and Blessing, I'm so sorry, let me take that again. I'm tripping over my words. So my editor will kindly edit this part out and take it from the top here. Howard Miller is the #1 best-selling author of Burdens and Blessings, a lighter-hearted approach for middle-aged folks dealing with aging parents, a heartfelt and humorous exploration of the challenges and joys of caring for aging parents. Through personal anecdotes, Miller shares his journey of navigating health issues, emotional struggles, and loss, emphasizing the transformative power of levity as a coping mechanism. With over 10 years of experience teaching management skills in the corporate world, Howard empowers professionals with the tools to work smarter, not harder, to achieve greater results. He's a sought-after speaker and engages corporate and community audiences with relatable stories showing how levity can strengthen relationships, reduce stress, and positively impact a company's ROI. Plus, in addition to his writing and speaking, Howard is a successful entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in the bookkeeping industry, and his work bridges the connection between processing grief and approaching life's everyday challenges, inspiring others to face adversity at home or in the workplace with resilience, perspective, and levity. And I think the first dose of levity that we'll have is that I'm tripping over my words today.
Well,
Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry. I hope you still feel proud of what you've accomplished.
Well, thank you, Traci. I was trying to, I thought, oh boy, I could start laughing. You'll start laughing.
I know.
It would. Past that.
It would happen that way.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You know, I pride myself on being pretty well spoken, but for whatever reason, couldn't get the words out today. But hopefully that'll improve over the course of our conversation.
You know, whenever I would teach a class and something, you do it after a while, it becomes routine. But if someone challenged something at the beginning of the class or something technical went wrong, I said to myself, oh, this is good. Because I knew that the day would be good.
Right. There's something. Yeah, it's true. It's true. We
Yeah.
can't all be perfect all the time. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I think this topic is one that, I didn't necessarily expect to bring to the podcast because it's something that I think sometimes we don't necessarily think about. Like, how do we caregive? How do we bring levity to the workplace? How that's all related. And levity is a big part to me of what makes me feel happy at work, like when we share laughs and things like that. So I guess I just didn't realize how much of a talking point this is, that levity is something that doesn't exist everywhere.
Well, what's interesting about that is when I first taught management skills and and communication and leadership skills and the way to be more effective with that, I wasn't necessarily thinking the same thing either. It was after experience, I don't know how many years, 10 years of my life being very different because as your parents start getting older and I was taking more time with them. And in the journey of it, creating over 350 documents about doctors, home care agencies, and just some thoughts and feelings and pills and all that. And then writing the book for me initially, because it was cathartic, one way to process grief. But I also realized other people can benefit as well.
Definitely.
And then I thought, well, lighter-hearted approach is levity. There's a lot of funny parts to the book because I grew up with humor. Laughter is the best medicine was a book that was in our house. And my mother, if we could get her to laugh in that moment, she was as alive as anyone else, right? When people would laugh. And it got me thinking, well, if I could have levity about this, where can people have levity in the workplace? And I do want to say that levity isn't necessarily being funny. Some people are just aren't funny, or they're not as funny, or it's so that's not necessarily what it is. It's being more lighthearted,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be something as simple as changing your perspective.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at it, if you're stressed in a situation, by reframing it, by asking different questions, that's a form of levity. So I thought that's how I came up with this, the concept. Oh, right. They do connect.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. Here I go with my words again. Because after we initially spoke, however many months ago at this point it was, I thought about a time in my career where I felt so weighed down by an experience that I felt was like really negative, and I was like unhappy and ready to leave. And at that time, I wasn't like the mature person that I am now. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave. And when I was reflecting on some of the points that you've just shared that we had talked about initially, I thought, like, wow, if I had just reframed what was happening in that moment, if I brought to myself a different perspective, even though I wasn't getting that elsewhere, maybe I would have overcome that challenge. Maybe I would have responded differently, because in the workplace, it can feel very intense when something is
Sure.
negative.
Yeah, and you might have responded, you still might have left, but it is all growing experiences, to not just leave, but to learn and go, okay, it's still a certain way, and you still choose to leave. I had a friend who was constantly in data, some kind of software development, and kept leaving companies. Well, what was the common thread? It was them.
Hmm.
But it takes, as you said, as we get older and learn. And it was my dad, who lived to 99.
Wow.
And it was July of 2021. And it was a few weeks before he passed. And my brother spoke to him a lot about his work. My brother's an entertainment lawyer, and he
Wow.
would be on the phone driving in LA in traffic. And my father would just listen. And at the end of this conversation, my father said to him, Andy, that's my brother, it'll work out. And if it doesn't work out, it worked out.
Mm.
And he told me that after, and then he died a few weeks later. We didn't know he was going to pass. And I was like, he may not have lived his whole life like that, but the fact that he shared that with us then, that's the quote in the front of my book. And it's a mantra I say to myself every day. So we're not going to make all the right decisions, but isn't it about now, Traci, I would ask you, I don't know how many years ago that job was, but do you remember the specifics of it, or you just remember you weren't happy? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Right?
kind
And
of like
that's
the
those
feeling you
like,
remember. Yeah.
right, you get so intense, and when it could even be just months later, oh, it's not going to mean anything. So
Totally.
yeah,
Totally. And
yeah.
it not only the title of your book, but also just the content of what it brings, it makes me think about something that I often say still to this day. So if any of my coworkers are listening, they're probably like, yeah, she says this. Anytime, like, something is like not going right, or something is messed up and we're like, oh my God, I'm always like, listen, if you don't laugh, you cry. So like, let's find something about this that we can just like, you know not feel so brought down by.
And I think, yes, I that's how I think that's how I live my life. You try to find, the glass, what's happened because of it, something that you didn't want to have happen, but if it didn't, you wouldn't have had something else.
Yeah, right. It's all
You
about
know?
the journey, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it'll work out.
Yeah,
That's I
absolutely.
mean, yes. Well, that's interesting. It is about the journey. I would go, if I had a class of managers, and managers, they could be new managers, leaders, but they had managers under them. And I would say, okay, you have 30 minutes of content to go over in a meeting. How long do you make the meeting? And I'd get answers from anywhere from 20 minutes to maybe an hour. And the answer really is at least an hour. How come? Because there's content and process. And what part is usually ignored?
The
The
process.
process. I mean, there could be questions, there could be discussions, and so we all have to be goal oriented. But it really, when you look at it, it's the process. I look at all the things you said that I do. Did I plan all that? No, I mean, it just happens, right? And you look and go, okay, that made sense. That job made sense. If I hadn't had that, it would go this way. So
Yeah.
So it's the process that we all really should be that will sustain us, and we'll look back and see that.
Right. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
helpful. And it does make me think about how one of the things that you tend to talk about is that levity can play a role in reducing stress and burnout, especially if an employee is balancing multiple priorities between their work and their personal lives. Where do you see that taking effect, so to speak?
Well, first, how do you feel about that employee in general? Right? Because it comes down to the hardest part for any kind of leader is to get over their ego,
Mm,
get over how they think about things. So if they have a negative feeling about a particular employee, they're going to look at that and go, they think they're not getting their work done. What you just said about not balancing work and personal, well, if they spent more time at work, right? As opposed that if
hmm.
they had things going on, like um, you would be like, wow, how can I help them how can I help them prioritize? So
Yeah.
it's all about communication and meeting with them. Now, first of all, that employee needs to go to their manager, right, and say something, but then you have to listen and be there to help them, not necessarily challenge them. That's It's easier said than done. And with some people, an example I've always used, you have a great employee, someone from another department comes to you and says, I have a problem with them. What do you
Like,
what
what does
and
that
what so
mean?
one person what was
I
that?
said, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, what you'd be like, you'd probably brush it off, right? You
Yeah.
have someone who you're having issues with, one person one time comes in and says they're having a problem, you're all over it, right? So it's hard, and we can't like everybody, but yet how do you put that aside? So when your question though is how do you balance the work and the personal, you have to trust the employee wants to get their work done, and you don't ignore it. You have to say, okay, I need to get this done by a certain date. The more specific you are about it, not about you're just not working hard enough or things are falling to the wayside,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah. No, that's
So
fair. I think when I think about levity, especially in this case where someone maybe is feeling all of this pressure to perform in both their work and personal lives and isn't necessarily getting the support that they need, because of these, obvious leadership kind of pitfalls. I do see, if a leader, to your point, can overcome those pitfalls and infuse levity or infuse more understanding or whatever it might be into their environment, then it's like you have a little bit of a reprieve, because I guess it kind of goes both ways. If you have a personal life that's really balanced and regulated and you don't have anything too chaotic or like burdensome happening, like you're getting a reprieve from your maybe more chaotic work life, while you're, not at work. But, and then like the same, I feel it could probably be true vice versa. But if you have two chaotic environments, that's probably not great.
but you can't control someone else's.
No,
In fact, actually, was just for some
no,
reason because I finished season 2 of Severance, where their brain goes and they separate their lives. That's not what
no.
real
Yeah,
life
right, right,
is.
right.
Real life isn't like that right
True.
here. But you, as the manager, there's only so much you can. Okay, the manager. Here's the focus they should have: is the job getting done or not? It's not they're too involved in their personal life. Is the job getting done or not? You have scenarios, someone comes in early or late, and I have my own opinion about those, that, and it's like, but if they're getting their job done, what are you focused on?
Right. And what
And
does it matter?
that and what does it matter? And of course, the managers might use that 4-letter word beginning with F that they shouldn't use, which is no,
Fire?
it's professional.
Oh, okay.
No, fair.
Oh,
Fair. That's not fair to others.
fair.
And it's like, fair is a terrible
Mm.
word because it's subjective.
Right. Like, what is fair?
I don't know what
Yeah.
is
I
fair.
have no
And
idea.
and when I do ask people, no, none of us do. If I ask managers, what's a 4-letter word beginning with F, and I say this is professional, that you should avoid. Most of them say fail, and I say, well, no, but the first
Oh,
3 letters are correct. But you have to let employees
of
fail
course.
because
Failure is a huge
how
part
they
of
learn.
success. Yeah.
I tell them the first 3 letters are correct, and then they get fair, because if you try to be fair, you will fail.
Mm.
And so it really comes down to, are they getting their job done? And if they're not getting something done, how do you get them to do it? And don't say because it's their personal life. I mean, they might bring it up, and there's totally legitimate reasons, right? All of us have things in our personal life that should take priority
Yeah.
at different times.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. It's true. Like even hearing your story about like your parents and some of the, you know, specific experiences that led, and I realize we should probably talk about this too a little bit further, but that
Mhm.
ultimately led to you writing your book. Um, there is no controlling life and when life happens, and it's how you cope with those things and deal with those things.
And you just reminded me, and I don't know if I put this in the book. I was teaching live. This is before the pandemic, and my father had broken his hip. It had to have been that year, so 2017. And I was about to start the class, or no, no, no. I started the class. I happened to glance down, and my brother called. Okay, I ignored it. Then my mother called. I'm like, it's like, okay, so I kept going, and then when they were doing something, I quickly, and it took me just a second when I heard one word. It wasn't any emergency, but then I had my mother. I said, okay, look, I will tell you when I'm teaching, and don't call, because at
Unless it's an
that point,
emergency.
yeah, even I mean, don't, and so I'll call you during my breaks or at lunch, just to check in, because at that point I was checking in with them at least once a day.
Sure.
So, but yeah,
That's
it was.
My dad is notorious for calling like 2, 3 times, then texting, "Call me," and I'm like, "What's going on? Is everyone
Right.
okay?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I just wanted to see. Are you and the girls? Are you guys coming to Jersey this week?" Like, could this not have waited? Like, I literally had
Right.
palpitations. Like, come on.
Right. But that I gave specific instructions and they were followed. But there's times we all have both lives. But
Yeah.
as and even the managers who feel like their employees' personal lives are too much, sometimes the manager is going to have that. So
Yeah.
we all have it.
It's true. It's true. It's
Yeah.
really true. I mean, it's perfectly likened to my podcast. It's called Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources. Like, and it doesn't just exist in HR. Like, bringing the human back to anything makes sense. And yeah,
I hope so. I hope so,
I hope
Tracy.
so.
Because when that stops, then we're not relevant as human beings,
Hmm.
right? If that stops, I think no matter what technology we go and move forward, the human being matters, and our
A thousand
feelings and our
percent.
words. Yeah.
A thousand
But
percent. I would
yeah.
love to hear more about the inspiration behind your book, how you even came up with the title Burdens and Blessings, and what you maybe even learned from writing it yourself.
So first, it's not my first book, but it's a personal book. When I was a coach earlier on, I put little marketing blurbs out where I learned three things. Just everyday life. My father said, "Please don't include me anymore," but it was called "You're full of shift." And then I wrote a book about managers called The Manager Trap. I I was accustomed to writing down things.
Hmm.
I I had the idea of writing this. I had the idea of writing books. I knew how to do it. And going through this, I took all these notes in the back of my mind. I thought, I will write it down. I didn't know where it was going per se right at the moment. That's just how
Sure.
I was.
Yeah.
And I think it was my mom passed December of 22. So it was around March. I went back down to LA to get stuff. I left at my brother's, and I went to a cafe and got an outline of what I could write, the different, how to handle just the different topics I put in there, financial considerations, when do you when do children become the parents? And
Yeah.
just, and then of course there was humor that they couldn't hear, they wouldn't get hearing aids, things like that. So I wrote it, as I said, for me, but then I, what was interesting to me is some of the thoughts in the book, lines I just wrote. I don't say they were putaways, but how they connected with people. Like I wrote in there, I didn't like when people called me a good son. Never like, oh, you're a good son. I said I was a dutiful son, because some of my thoughts, Tracy, were not necessarily good. Now, really, I have a tennis buddy who wasn't close with he was estranged from his dad. And I
Mm.
said, would you, when he goes, are you going to have any regrets? He goes, no, no. And I go, and in some ways, I was kind of envious. Not really, but yeah, you know what I
But it's
mean? It
like to
was
just
like,
be so unburdened.
I was not, I was, and I think I even said to them once, you're my burdens and blessings. I don't know how much they appreciated that,
Well, the question
but
is, could they hear if they were not willing to get the hearing aids? Maybe they never even heard what you said.
no,
They
they
heard.
heard when they
Okay.
wanted to hear. They heard when they, it's funny. After dad passed, my brother said to me, I could see why he didn't want a hearing aid. He didn't want to necessarily hear everything my mother was saying. No, they heard, but it would just
It
been an
was
enhance.
right.
Yeah. So, oh no, my mother also couldn't, and this is in the book. She couldn't see. She did. She had macular degeneration. The shots didn't work, but one time I came in after driving 6 hours. I walk in, she goes, Howard, those shorts are hideous. And I said, I thought you can see. She goes, Howard, one doesn't have to see how hideous those shorts. So, so
What did you do with the shorts?
eventually I got rid of
Oh,
them
okay.
because they aren't
But not until you wanted to.
yeah, right.
That's so funny.
But so there were so what I learned from writing the book is there's different parts. Oh, so the dutiful versus good
Hmm.
son, that's what I was talking about. I did what I was raised to do. I mean, it
Sure.
doesn't it I we did I couldn't have not done it. You know what I
Right.
mean? I could not have done what we did. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm grateful that my parents lived to 99 and 92, and dad lived with his mind. He broke
Yeah,
his
thank
hip at
God.
94, lived 5 more years, even though 90% of people die.
Yeah.
Um, well,
After
actually, the
after a
irony
major
is,
fall, I guess,
yeah,
right?
my dad, who never was athletic, took 5 years. My mom, who played tennis till about 80, and she broke her hip and was dead in less than 48 hours,
Wow.
mercifully, because
Wow.
at that point, so you don't know, but just it was what we did. What I couldn't have not done it, but there were a lot of it changes your life. So I was a little jealous of
Yeah,
that,
of
but
like the
you
lack
know,
of heaviness, I guess. And although I guess it's hard to know if even without those burdens, if there isn't something different burdening that person potentially
oh,
or
we
feeling
all
heavy.
right, of course, but I feel I had the privilege to watch two people get old without major illnesses. Yeah,
Yeah,
my
it's a
mother had her
blessing.
illnesses, but there was no cancer. There was, there wasn't anything like that. And in fact, when they were, for a while, they would joke. Like, I guess it could have been even my father, either late 80s or early 90s, and my mother would have been maybe early 80s. And they said to me once or twice, how does it feel hanging out with old people? And reflecting on that, I realized you're not old when you say that.
You're not. You're not.
You're not.
You're just not.
Because when they got old, they didn't say that. And everyone gets old at a different time. We could all joke, "Oh, we're feeling
Yeah.
things," but we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm still learning from, when in fact, I'm doing an audio version of my book on Wednesday, and I'll
Oh.
learn more as I read every word of it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, especially
Yeah.
aloud. I mean,
Yes. Well,
reciting things is totally different.
when I did that to get with someone else to get the kinks out and all that, I really felt the burden. You could feel the stress
Yeah.
of it, but everyone has that. And I mean, as people are living longer, we're all going to have that, and that does impact your your life, and including work.
Definitely.
And 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 there's no so this is why, I was naive, but I thought once the pandemic started and so many more people were working from home, companies would realize, oh, this still things are getting done. We don't have to have mandatory work hours if people come in, but I feel like there's a push the other way.
Yeah, lately, yeah.
And I feel like if people had more flexibility to get the work, I think most people want to get their job done. They feel responsible, and they need to balance it
Yeah.
out. So
I agree. I agree. I
yeah.
think most people do also. I think this is where it comes back to leadership pitfalls. Like if a leader is unable to get past their sense or need for control, then they're going to require that people are in the office so they can watch and see.
Well, then they're not, in my opinion, effective leaders, but they do have an ability to control.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because if you're working, and actually what my experience was, managers, this is back in before, I would say in the mid, well, I don't know what decade, 2014, 15, whatever, 2010 to 15. I don't know. We call that decade,
I know
but
the odds, the
yeah,
20 odds, something like
I don't know.
yeah.
Managers, I felt, who had remote employees had more process with them than the ones they see every day, because I'm a big believer in weekly one-on-one meetings, and I
Hmm.
have an agenda for that, to let the employee talk and ask them what's going well and what their challenges is, and then you bring up what you want based on their challenges and you use their words. It's much more effective. So
Yeah.
you have control. You're just not, if especially if you need something done and you're meeting with them, and you could say, well, this needs to get done. Sometimes they don't know what the priorities that you want. So
1,000%. And I think when I reflect on my work experience in both typical office settings and then now being a remote employee, I think there's much more time spent one-on-one with people and with my leaders
mhm.
than when I was in an office, because it's true. You kind of just like, I mean, maybe if you add up the times where you're like, hey, I have a question for you, or oh, can we just chat about this? Maybe if you add that up, it's like kind of similar. But I do think that there is a bit more of an organized approach to just operating, being remote, because you can't have it any other way. And there's so much more interfacing.
And it doesn't mean you're not you can't be human as well, right?
Totally.
But I think the process doesn't mean you're not human. It just means it's building the communications to be more effective, to
Right.
get, is the job getting done or not?
Right.
Right? You can't really, if you look at your personal life, I don't think you're ever going to say it that way. Is everything getting done? Because it doesn't, right? But it is a way I think it's helpful for everyone involved.
I agree. I
You know?
agree. It's funny. So I related a lot to what you said before around how does it feel to, be hanging out with a bunch of old people. My grandma is 99 and her
Cool.
sister is 103, if you can
Wow.
believe it, right? And they
Wow.
both, thank God, knock on wood, live independently and all this stuff. And my grandma, every day, she's like, we'll say to her, why don't you like use the senior bus every now and then? You can go and get your nails done. She always has us order an Uber for her. God bless, honestly. And she's like, I don't want to hang out with all those old people. I'm like,
Eh,
okay.
So I just your 103-year-old aunt lives by
She
herself.
does. She's very
Yeah,
fortunate. They
and
both
she
do.
has
Yeah.
they don't drive.
No, 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 no.
No, okay. But okay, so you have many, many years ahead of you. That's kind of cool. Well, yeah, the outlook. My parents did take the bus. I remember my father had pacemaker put in, I get, and interesting enough, because it was wireless connected, he figured out how to do that. But I was there once when he had the phone call with, or I don't know if I zoomed with the doctor, and he asked how long the battery lasts. He was 97, and
Hmm.
she checked. She goes, 8 years, and he goes, what do we do after that?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Good for
he always
him.
said he wanted to live to 120. So,
Good for him.
but
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah.
Well, the will to live is a big part of living, I think,
So
seeing what you have in front of you.
the will to live is significance. We all need to feel significance in our lives, and when we're younger, a lot of us put it just in, not just into our okay, I'll say just into our jobs, but then that's why that word retire seems strange to me as someone who works for myself. It's like I don't have to, as long as I could balance my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's harder when you're working in a for someone else full time. I get that, but you still,
Yeah.
maybe you do something else. But when you get into your 90s, I don't know, it sounds it's like what did you do this morning, and they say I had breakfast. That's a source of significance for them. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and if we just said we had just what did we do this morning, had breakfast, maybe, it's like, oh my god, I got nothing done, right?
Totally. If you ask me, I would say that for myself. But it's interesting because how often are we reflecting on life in the present and the past and the future in a way where we're like, well, what was significant for me then and what's significant for me today?
So I don't think we do that. I no, my experience is I can't pick a year, but certainly I think there's either you've had someone like people who are younger who's someone significant size you
Yeah.
might reflect, but generally I would say it's 40s or above.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know what middle age is anymore where you start to reflect, but that doesn't mean but you don't have to reflect. For someone listening to this is like, well, that's not me, but you do get stressed, right? You
Mm-hmm.
might not have what you think is to be funny in the workplace, but you do get stressed. There's an easy way to shift that perspective, and the easy way is how you talk to yourself and others in forms of questions. And most of us start questions with the word why, and I say don't start with the word why. Do you know why, Tracy?
Well, what happens when you break your own rule? No, do I know what? Well, I think it probably makes someone immediately think about what you're looking to get from their answer.
It puts you on the
Yeah,
defensive to
yeah.
answer that
That's
question.
yeah.
And actually, and so I say start every question with a what or a how.
Hmm.
There's where or when or neutral questions. Where are we going for lunch? But what or how? And you could change every why question to what or how. And if anyone tries that, it can change their whole perspective of life. And I'm dead serious about that, because when I do that, it's why is this late? What prevented this from coming in on time? And it's amazing how people can answer that differently.
Yeah, yeah. It lets
And
their guard down.
my question to you that said, do you know why? I would say never start with leading questions. Do you know why? Will you get this done?
Oh,
Because when
mhm.
your boss says, will you get this done by Friday? What do they want to hear?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the only
And the question,
option.
and you say it to shut them up.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, so if you really want an answer, how will you get this done?
Yeah.
So,
Or
so
what help do
anyone,
you need to get this
yeah,
done?
well,
Oh, but
yes,
that's
you
a
asked
little
that.
leading too, I suppose. What help do you
No,
need to?
well, well, it's leading. Well, it's leading if you don't want. If they say to you, "I need your help," if you're not willing to give the help, you better make sure. Or you're like, what help or what support do
Hmm.
you need? You may not be able to give them any,
Mm.
but you could ask it. No, I mean, not every question is, even with a what or how, is great. But I'm just talking about adding levity.
Yeah.
And I thought of that because you mentioned, when do you reflect back, and it's like, yeah, I think that's, yeah, I think the older you get, you do. I mean, this is going to sound, I don't know, corny or whatever, but after, I think, just my dad passed, and I looked at a tree, and it's like, we humans are, that tree is around a longer time than we
Hmm.
are. We're here, and our time goes fast. It may not seem like it at some point, but then you look back and go, what just happened?
Hmm. Literally. Literally. It's so true.
Well, so, and again, that's what I think, what my father said, it'll work out. If it doesn't work out, it worked out. So there are a lot of things at any age that people could do for levity, which is funny, but and you have to be careful about that too, because if there's a situation in the moment where humor isn't appropriate, that may not be, you pull it back a little
Sure. You
bit,
have to
right?
have some awareness of the situation, situational awareness.
Absolutely, because sometimes, but and again, sometimes one on one, it depends.
Yeah. It
On
also
the
depends on the
communication.
relationship.
Yeah, oh yeah,
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 for sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. As I especially said, if for the manager who doesn't like an employee, or the employee doesn't like the manager, right? The employee doesn't trust the manager. They're never going to be able to connect with the manager if they keep holding that.
Yeah, it's so true. I think about how, sometimes there's a breakdown, especially cross functionally. Sometimes, like if one department wants something specific, the other department wants something specific, and there isn't alignment there, how it can be such an intense, like, conflict ridden experience for people. And it feels personal when someone tells one thing or says another. And when I think about even really what your dad said, it's like, well, there are hard and fast rules to certain things, and also like everyone has this opportunity and this capability to be flexible and to think about their own needs maybe even a little bit differently. Like, sure, my needs in my department are going to feel the most important to me, but they're not always
Right.
going to be the most important to other people. So how do you that's where I think like relationships are so critical, because a lot of where people start to care about what you care about comes from them having respect for you and feeling, something other than, oh, this is a coworker.
That's yes. I coached a leading chief architect at a software company in the Silicon Valley, and he had a very important job, so he told me, but he did. He could set direction, but
Yeah.
people weren't listening to him. And in my first two coaching sessions with him, we just weren't connecting. And I was confident enough to think, okay, it's not my coaching, just we're not connecting. So I was going to bring it up. And he brought it up in our third or fourth session. And he said, you've been giving me suggestions and I've been fighting them. And he goes, I just always thought relationships would just work themselves out. It's the, what the end
Mm,
result that matters. And that we could have ended our coaching then. And he then set to meet people when he went to towns and just go out for coffee, necessarily not about what he wanted, just what you were saying, just to get to know them.
yes.
And then when you get to know each other a little bit,
Goes a long way.
it goes. I used to have problems with my upstairs neighbor, and now we had something, and then I don't know, we get along now. It's
Luckily.
because we're all
Yeah.
well, yeah, because we're all human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
At the end of the
like
day, like, I mean, that's what I don't try to boil things down so much where it's like, oh, are we oversimplifying things? But really, we're not. I mean, at the end of the day, we all close our eyes to go to sleep, and we all hopefully open our eyes to wake up, and that's just, that's what makes us all so similar. And we have like there's so many things that we can relate on with other people, and especially for those listening who are in HR, there's so much that they can do, so much more they can do in their careers if they focus on building relationships, I think.
yeah, one story here that I give an exercise to people, and I say you're leading a department, you've been working for a while with them about a direction you're going to go, and you made your decision. One third of the team will love the direction you're going to go. One third of the team will hate the direction you're going to go, and one third of the team are on the fence. You have your first meeting after you make your decision. Which of those three groups do you focus on in that meeting? And I put people into groups to decide which one. And most people pick on the fence.
Yeah, that's what I
Well,
probably would have gone with.
the answer is the group that hates it.
Hmm.
And the reason, I remember I said one third, one third, one third. If you have 100 people and two people hate it, talk to them offline. But I'm talking it's equal.
Hmm.
And the reason for the first meeting you do that is everyone wants to be heard. Let them vent. Let
Hmm.
them vent one more time. Plus, the people who love it will talk with you, and the people on the fence could help make their decisions. But
Hmm. That's a
everyone
really
wants
good
to
point.
be. Yeah, this it goes down well to you about it, it's what you were saying. Everyone wants to be heard,
Yeah.
and it goes to the great name of your podcast that we're just all human.
Yeah.
We're human. I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so helpful. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today. And
Yeah.
as expected, I think we've touched on so many things that will hopefully allow everyone listening to think maybe a little bit differently, or feel really inspired by what they can do to even just ask questions differently or add levity into their own experiences or in their workplaces. And so with that, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share where everyone can connect with you and really learn a lot more about what you do and who you are.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, my website, which will be fulcrumpointpartners.com, and I actually have a backslash with human so they could connect to
Yes.
us. And there you could get my book, but also get a link to. I teach management classes, and I'd love to speak more on levity. I'd love to come into different corporate your organizations and talk about it and just because I think it makes us all human.
It
and
does.
actually, and let's talk business wise right now. Remember, I have a bookkeeper. It'll help your bottom line.
It will.
It will help. That's what all this is about, right? I mean, when you look, I mean, it's more than that. But when it also makes you work not as hard. When you work not as hard, you get more results. It helps your bottom line.
It's true. And you know what? Frankly, there are people who only care about that. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's how you have to appeal to them, and help them to
There are
understand.
people who there are people who should just care about that. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. Sorry to bring that up, but I feel like there are
It's
people,
good.
they have other things that they might think, but their job, their role is to just care about that. Let me rephrase
Yeah,
it. Their
yeah.
role is to about, and you need people to do
Yes,
things
it's true.
because we're a we're we have an economy and we have there's there, but it doesn't mean we can't have both.
Right. Two things can be true
So
at once, and everyone
that's
serves a
right.
different purpose in upholding the balance between those things, you know?
That's right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. What a perfect way to close out our conversation, actually. And I would love to, let's keep the communication channels open. If you write another book, if you come up with other ideas around how to, really jazz up the workplace and help to bring the human back to all of it, we'd love to have you back on.
I would love to do that.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing. And for all the listeners, we'll have the link with the specific landing page for all of you in the show notes, so you can click there and connect with Howard and learn a bit more. So Howard, thank you so much again for your time. Really appreciate it.
That's great. Time has flown by.
I know, right? We've had so much fun. Thank you so much. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.